Welcome to today's edition of Pulp Nonfiction, the paper and packaging podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is the first one of our series, and we have, drum roll, the lovely Bonnie Wright. And just in case that you don't know, have been under a rock for a few years or something, Bonnie has been part of the main cast in the Harry Potter movies. And I remember one of the times that we spoke when we were working together. And I kind of like lured the whole Harry Potter subject into the conversation. And she told me that those movies were great for escapism. And that was such a resonating word for me at the time. I mean, who didn't need escape in the last few months? But I was actually particularly going through, a rough time. And thanks to you, Bonnie, I did get to escape. I did get to watch them. Thank you for that tip. Besides being very well known for the Harry Potter movies, in fact, she got to marry Harry as Ginny Weasley. She has also been a very hands-on activist as part of the Rainforest Alliance, as well as part of Lumos, which is J.K. Rowling's founded organization. The actual writer of the book Harry Potter, the books of Harry Potter, did also found Lumos, and Bonnie Wright is an ambassador for that organization. Check it out as well. It's certainly worth to do so. So I like to start with something that actually you and I spoke about when we were working on this project together. What is this sustainability to you? What comes to your mind when you hear sustainability?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here talking with you both. Sustainability, I think I'm of a similar sort of mindset as you. I think the word sustainability actually often makes me feel a little nervous because I think it's been used and we've kind of stripped it of its true meaning, I think. And I think many businesses have kind of used it as a way to sort of distract sometimes the consumer, or maybe politicians can distracting citizens. And when I think about sustainability, I think it is about development for the future that basically doesn't compromise the current generations or future generations. I think it's really looking at how do you create things that actually you're projecting into a future so that future generations can still sustain life. I think we think about sustainability, but like sustaining just our ability to exist, and not just resources, but also enjoyment. How do we keep sustaining life so it's enjoyable, not really challenging for future generations? And I think when I see someone use the word sustainability, I really try to seek transparency behind what they really mean with that. Like what part of if they create products, what part of their product line, hopefully everything, is quote unquote sustainable. I really want a brand or an individual or a service or a government to really look at that and really hold themselves accountable for all elements to their system, their organization. So it isn't just kind of what we see at face value looking sustainable. I want to really know the ins and outs and make sure it's easy for me to find. I think often if things aren't easy to find through looking at that sort of organization or place's website, then to me it feels like they're hiding something. So I really seek transparency behind that word.
Yeah, Bonnie, that was well said. And thank you again for joining us. I know you've been super successful as an actress, and as Marta mentioned, you've been involved quite a bit in different environmental movements. When and how did you actually become interested in sustainability? Could you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, it's hard to pinpoint a moment when sort of the lights went on in terms of really understanding sort of how we relate to our environment and how our actions have cause and effect. I think the more and more I've got into sort of my relationship to the planet, the more I realize a lot of this stems back from actually when I was quite young. I think for me, I was always someone who really loved to take part in anything. I was really someone who saw the importance of showing up. Like, I think at a young age, that was like every single extra like school thing that you could be a part of. Or, you know, if there were nonprofit charity initiatives happening at school, I was always the first to be really interested in taking part in that and just showing up physically to those things. And then I think also I grew up in a family that really, you know, lived on a very like waste not, want not mentality. And they very much believed in sort of mending things and taking care of things and really just being mindful towards the things you interact with and really seeing that like quality over quantity mindset. So I think that kind of gave me some foundation for sure. But then I think it wasn't really till I traveled on a ship with Greenpeace back in, I think it was 2017, that was part of a trip they were doing down the Atlantic coast, sort of going to coastal communities and raising awareness around the campaigns they were doing and really trying to just connect with those coastal communities. So I had the privilege to go on board that ship, and we did a lot of trawling for microplastics, and I just got to spend a lot of time with the ocean campaigners on the ship. And I was just so inspired by their dedication to the topic. And I was so sort of heartbroken in the few trawlings that I was a part of, not one didn't bring up some type of plastic. When you're in the middle of a beautiful ocean that looks pristinely perfect, and just firsthand like pulling that net up and seeing those bits of tiny pieces of plastic and sorting through them and putting the data into the systems, I just came home just like all day, every day, I need to focus on this. It became suddenly something, I think really the campaigners inspired me, and just being out with them on the ship. And I really started to see what can I do, not only in these kind of global actions, like whether that's petitions, you know, taken to corporations, to governments, you know, focusing on policy, but also like what could I do in my day-to-day life so that I genuinely felt like at least I was trying my best. I really don't think there's any perfect environmentalist. I think it's quite the opposite. Like, I think it's more interesting. I've realized over time that like you can only do what you can do that day. So I've really enjoyed, just seeing where my curiosity takes me to try new things, to be a bit more mindful with how I kind of relate to what I consume, and just also how I connect with, the planet that we're on, and I'm so grateful to experience.
That sounds like such an awesome trip. I would love to do that one day. And I totally agree with you with the how you grow up really defines the way that you approach waste management, right? Very much like you grew up in a rural area where you had to be green. You know, there was no other choice. How about the film industry? Where are some of those green practices that you're seeing that are happening day to day? Or that you see that they could even be better? There's a lot of where you find a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, I really love that question, because I think it's something that I definitely battle with. I think as an industry is incredibly wasteful. You know, huge sets and worlds are built for these incredible films that, as you mentioned, we can, escape to and enjoy, but also a huge amount of waste can come from that. On the flip side, there's also, a lot of things that are rented on film sets, which I think is a really great model in terms of like not really many people, own their lighting and camera equipment. That's mainly hired, or a lot of props. There are incredible prop houses where a lot of companies also go to rent a lot of the things. So there's this idea that, something that maybe you hold in one film could be used by another actor in a couple of films in the future, which I think is a really lovely idea, that like it can continue to tell stories, the same object. We don't need new things all the time. But then also a lot of things are built and made. And obviously in big film sets, you're feeding kind of and keeping all these people happy, hundreds of people on a film set, which obviously means a lot of, food and snacks and all these things that we know often come in kind of very hard to recycle or reuse packaging. So there's the kind of two sides of it. There's like the physical production of what gets made. There's obviously so many costumes too that are worn. Obviously those things can be really hard to recycle, and obviously the clothing and garment industry is a huge polluter. So there are huge loads of questions that really I struggle with, for sure, being part of that industry. I think in my own world, when I make my own short films that now I kind of exist a lot more behind the camera. I really do try and see how I can reduce our waste on set. And I think another important thing is not just the physicality of making a film, but if you have a story, is there anything you're saying in that story that is related to this issue? I think for me now, more and more, pretty much all the films that I'm making are really related to the climate. Even if it's a little obscure, like at the moment I'm really working on kind of looking into like how the horror genre and sort of monster movies essentially, and like playing with that mysticism and horror and how you can kind of, I don't know, kind of pull the viewer into a story that maybe they don't really realize is actually still something saying something about waste. But just how could you maybe weave into some nice sort of character details where it felt like those characters were being a bit more conscious, because I think a lot of characters in films obviously are such role models for people. So I think there's a lot of power that film and media has, and I really hope that people take on the responsibility to step up to that, not just in the characters, but then also in just their production. And how can you maybe reuse set pieces, or are there like maybe community theatre groups that those sets could be donated to that could have a longer life out of them?
Yeah. And also the clothing, right? Actually, there is something there that really attracted my attention when you talk about characters and how we can shape those characters to show, that more conservative side when it comes up to waste and reusability and all of that. Because it is something that has been annoying me for the longest time while I watch reality shows. Like, they are so wasteful in reality shows. Like, seriously, you see like young people being like, oh, okay, let's just throw the bottle here. Or let's just use a plastic cup. That would be a perfect way of actually introducing a lot of influence, right, on how we can all do a little better in the right direction. Like I always repeat these, everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to pick up the tab. And that's where a lot of these issues come, right? We all want to do the right thing, but nobody wants to pay extra for it. And speaking of right things, what are the things that you do that make you feel good about yourself, sleep well at night, proud, you want to tell people? Tell us so we can tell our audience too. I want our audience to follow some of your examples because I know that they're so good.
Yeah, I think there's individual actions that I do kind of quietly in my own home, which is sort of what's inspired me to write a book recently, which I'd love to talk more about. But also I think a huge thing that makes me sort of less anxious and more feeling like I'm participating in change is really finding community, finding people to talk to so that you're not alone in this struggle. Like, it's really, I think, so many systems that have been designed in the last decade to a century that have created all these problems are inherently like breaking down community and society, I think, in a way. Like, we're so strong when we have a friend that we're doing it with. Like, we feel just so much more kind of accountable in the world, whether that's just like a friend, a partner, a sibling, a parent, a teacher, like anyone that you can sort of go to feel like you have someone else that you're trying to do this with. I think instantly the whole thing becomes a lot more enjoyable. So maybe just looking up an existing community in your area to join into in terms of with an environmental cause or a local chapter to a larger organization. And then in my day-to-day, I feel like the beauty with all the things that we can be doing for the environment is there are hundreds and hundreds of things out there. So even if you try something, you don't quite enjoy it, or you find it challenging, there's another thing to participate in. So for me personally, as I said, I'm really interested in kind of our waste, and how do we make our waste not waste? How do we actually like have a really deep relationship with waste in a positive way and see it as resources rather than waste? How do we look to what we have and not just see it as a cup, but you're seeing that as paper, and you're seeing that as pulp, and you're seeing that as wood. It's not just a cup that's now lost its value because you drank the coffee out of it. Like, you're seeing it as a resource that's been taken, and I've got responsibility over that. Like, something was, taken from the earth, and now I have that. So So I'm really interested in that. Like, how do I change my perception of waste and make it energy and a resource? And to me, the biggest thing that I love to do, not only just focus on my packaging, but I'm really interested in just witnessing kind of stuff decomposing, like compost, and seeing how that can help your plants, whether that's starting your own compost system, whether that's dropping off compost at maybe a local community drop-off that you can find. I think it's an amazing way to just show you that like waste doesn't need to be waste, like it can become literal energy again to grow more plants.
Yeah, listen, people, waste has value. I love that.
Mhm.
I don't think that people truly realize how valuable waste is, right?
Yeah, and I think in the future, that's where we're going to find our resources. Like, I genuinely think, obviously there are many countries that people are already forced to live by, open dumps and sort of look and pick for valuable resources in those dumps of trash and things. And I think we're all going to be doing that, because we would have taken all the resources, and a lot of where our resources are will be in landfills if we don't really start thinking about it correctly.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do at Sustana Fiber, Bonnie. We're essentially a recycling mill. And what we do is we take things like paper cups, corrugated containers, juice boxes, and then we transform that trash into reusable FSC and FDA compliant fiber that's turned back into paper cups and carry out containers and even microwavable sleeves. So we're really trying to capture waste when we can and repurpose and reuse it. Just is there anything you struggle with personally or professionally in terms of something sustainable that you wish you did better? Whether it's composting or recycling or separating your trash, anything like that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, always. There's so many things that, I've yet to even kind of dabble with or participate in or kind of try to implement in my day-to-day life. I think for me, the more I realize, like, why am I always so interested in sort of consumer products when it relates to food, is probably because I love cooking and I love eating and I love enjoying those things. So, a big focus of me has been those things. And then after kind of looking at my kitchen, I kind of really looked at my bathroom and beauty products, and it was kind of cleaning products. And naturally, obviously, the way I've progressed through my home and my day-to-day life is like through my interests. And, a big thing that I really want to work towards is in my home, if I ever need to buy something, how do I first look at sort of the secondhand market of those things, whether that's small appliances, whether that's technology, whether that's even clothing, and different sort of, things in my home, furniture. How do I really deprogram that kind of initial response to just instantly go to looking at something new because it's been marketed to me, to like, it's directly marketed at me. It's like, it's perfectly designed. It's like, it's my taste and it's hitting all those buttons. But actually I could like direct my gaze to something that might take me a bit longer to find secondhand. And it could have much more kind of worth and story to me. So I think that's a big thing that I'm really trying to look at. I've also recently been I got a sewing machine for my 30th birthday from my parents, and
Neat.
been really trying to get better at that and just make some things myself, or really get better at mending things as well when it comes to clothing, or like, altering things to sort of like breathe a new life into an item of clothing.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic.
I always say that shopping in my closet is a lot more fun than I thought.
Definitely. And I even think, when we're considering purchases, just like nothing better than sleeping on a decision. Just one night, 24 hours. Like,
Sure.
I feel like my mindset can often really quickly change. Like, actually, now I've had like 24 hours away from that. I don't maybe need that, or I have something like you say already, or, I don't know. I just think things have become, obviously it's a very expensive time to be living in. But at the same time, when you really sometimes look at products that have, like whether that's a camera that I'm looking into, like all the different like tech pieces that has in it, and it's kind of providing this amazing image, it's kind of pretty cheap. So many things can be made so cheaply, even though obviously the access and funds that people have to those can vary massively. But I think things become easier to break because they're sort of like used, like the quality of material is used. I don't know, I think, I don't know, like the Right to Repair Act is something that I'm really interested in too. Like how can we give back the right for people to be able to fix products where companies have found loopholes that, like Apple and different things, that you can't
Right.
fix things you have. And I think that really destroys a mindset of like the capabilities and possibilities of things, I think, if you're kind of forced into like buying something new all the time.
Paper or plastic?
Paper or plastic, or paper and plastic?
Paper or plastic? You can choose both, but just lead us through.
No,
your
I mean,
thoughts.
I hate plastic, so
I do.
it's paper. I think, yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, obviously, Master and I have spoken a lot about materials in the last couple of months through the process of writing my book. She's very kindly sort of answered complex and maybe obvious questions that I've been asking her. And I think just our understanding of materials is really just based these days on how those materials have been marketed to us, not actually us knowing like any properties of those materials, whether that's like the structure of them and how they are recycled, or like where did that come from? Is it a virgin plastic or paper? Is it 100% recycled? Is it 50% recycled? All these things like are very difficult, I think, for us to find out about. Like so many people, friends of mine, because they know I'm really interested in the subject, will often ask me questions and they want like yes or no or right or wrong, and I'm like, I can tell you what I kind of understand, but like I think it's really difficult to navigate. And I wish and hope that obviously initiatives like this, podcasts like this, can help people to be like, oh, okay, I understand a little bit more now about paper and how that can be recycled and transformed and remade and reused, just by seeing some like visual stories or even verbal stories, as we're talking about. Like how do we basically tell a really good story so people understand about materials?
In terms of paper-based packaging versus plastic-based packaging, I know Europe is certainly well ahead of us in that regard. And where do you see this shaking out maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, both in Europe as well as the US, in terms of paper versus plastic?
Yeah, I don't know if I would agree that Europe is ahead. I would say that there are some things that, my experience obviously of the UK and America as two places that I've lived, they're ahead in some things and super behind in other things. I think like what's in something, I would say it was really coming to America that made me actually truly read ingredients lists on food and things. Like there's many more things here in terms of like processed kind of, corn syrup, all these different things that you have to be a little bit more aware of, obviously, because they have a huge environmental impact, not only our health. So I think I definitely became a little bit more kind of aware of sort of seeking, I guess, again, this transparency word behind brands than maybe I was in Europe. But then, I went back to the UK recently and I go to a grocery store and I saw more plastic there than I do in the grocery stores in the US. So I honestly don't know. Like, I don't really know if I've learned anything more from either side of the pond, to be honest. I think a big fear of mine, honestly, with the future of packaging is kind of mixed materialed plastics, or
multi-layered.
Multi-layered, or just like you get one thing and there must be like 5 or 6 different, it's like a box, a sleeve, you open it, there's another thing, there's just all these different parts that could be difficult to break apart. Or also, these products that are quote unquote compostable, biodegradable, but in a facility that probably won't take them and you're never really going to take it to. There isn't many things that I could throw in my compost and actually see it and witness it biodegrading as it kind of leads me to believe. So I think when it comes to like the future of material, I genuinely get quite anxious that the design of new materials is maybe a little bit too far ahead than our waste management and recovery systems.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think when it, like, maybe just more and more systems will come in place that are kind of these privatized sort of systems that have these amazing models, as you are doing, whether more of those have to come about in order to kind of help the issue. I just get worried about kind of too many mixed materials and kind of development without really maybe testing the afterlife. Also, I think we just don't know. Like, there hasn't been enough time for us to even witness a lot of these materials
Sure.
doing what they say they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a really exciting time for materials too, because I think if you're aware of that, you can really like bring that knowledge to the industry of packaging and different things. I think for me, I'm just like a curious sort of nerdy person that likes materials, but I don't know anything chemically or scientifically about them, but I'm like concerned about them. So it's like brought me towards materials that I probably wouldn't ever have been interested in, but I have an environmental angle to it. So I hope maybe that more people are led to those roles in the same way that there has been an increase seen in people signing up for environmental sciences or sciences in the past kind of decade in terms of like undergraduate programs and stuff.
No, sure. Well, I really admire your passion. I can tell you're really concerned, as we all are on this podcast, about the environment and what we can do. But I know, Marta, you and I have talked about the sort of patchwork system across the United States of recycling, where you can recycle one product in one state but not in the other. There's deposits in some states but not in other states, and it gets confusing for the consumer. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to too, Bonnie.
Mm-hmm. And I think too that is a problem or challenge when it comes to the US, state and federal, all these things. I would say in times that I've campaigned about issues in the UK, change happens a little bit more easily sometimes, not always, sometimes, just because the layers of kind of governance is less complicated. You're not working at kind of state and federal. It's all just one. You're working just with the country. So I'm sure that proves to be really challenging when you're developing products, because one state could accept that and another state can't.
And you and I talked about this many times too. It's so hard for me to explain to people how recycling works and what makes something recyclable.
I think giving people guidance, you can't say like, okay, this number plastic is good, this one's bad, this type of paper is mixed with, plastic liner. So you can't, like, it's like an overload of information that I can't tell anyone, because, you really do have to sort of Google, like, what does my city accept in its curbside recycling program? And like just putting that into Google, finding it out, and noticing, did your city make it quite difficult for you to find out that information? Well, that's a problem in the system. And that makes you realize like where policy or where the relationship with your city council needs to be better. So I think like often when things are difficult to find or difficult to change, it always is like, this is a system problem. It's not your fault and you're not bad for not doing that or finding it difficult to do. That's like something beyond your, power.
Yeah, but I would recommend to everybody out there listening, don't be afraid of asking. Don't be afraid to look. Public officials are there to serve the community, and therefore you can call the Department of Sanitation in your city and get all these things straightened out. It's not, it will take you a little bit of time, but it certainly is worth it. We should all do things like this, right?
Tell us about this, your new book, if you could. I know you and Marta have been working on it. Yeah, and everything else that's coming along for you.
Yeah, so my book that I unfortunately can't say the title of yet, it's coming out in April next year. And the book is kind of about all the things we've been talking about. Just sort of what do I do? Where do I start? How do I kind of implement change in a way that's like tangible and accessible and possible for me in my day-to-day? So I've kind of based it obviously on all these things that I've been curious and interested in and trying out. So it really focuses on the home. It's basically a book about how do you kind of make your first environment, which is your body, your home, really reflect the values you care about in terms of the wider, larger global environment. So it's quite sort of practical book about, how to navigate choices when you're at the grocery store or, online shopping, how to sort of cook in a way that you're really getting the most out of the vegetables or different things that you've bought, whether that's kind of preparing and storing food, and then also how do you store food to get the most out of it? How do you mend clothes? How do you sort of kind of make your own cleaning products? There's different, very specific, tangible things. And then on the more kind of broader topics in the book, it also looks at like how do you sort of identify your role within social change. I think so many people might just see the only way to get involved in the climate movement is to be, an activist at the front of a rally or speaking on a stage, but there's so many other roles that are really important in our movement, whether that's just organizers, whether that's people who want to drive people to the rally, whether that's people who want to kind of care and hold space for people when it comes to kind of our well-being. So it looks at, sort of your home, and then at the end it goes into this chapter of kind of what next? How can I kind of apply this to my community? How do I even find a community? What does that look like? So it's been something that I never thought I would do. I think I'm kind of the one thing I am grateful for in this past year and a half is just the time and energy and focus I've been able to put to this book. It's quite a solitary experience writing a book, which is the kind of time we've been in. So it's been the one good thing that's come out of it.
And I would recommend everybody to grab a copy. Like she said, it is practical. It is not like so many other materials out there that talk about sustainability. You know that I don't like that word, but circular economy and loop cycles and things like that. It sounds more aspirational, right? Those things that, well, I don't need to do this because I don't even know what is my impact on that. But this is very practical, and it goes to all those things that we all can do to do the contribution to get us in the right direction. So I can't wait to see it. The whole thing. Are you going to put it on print or are you going to online? Both?
It comes out in, you could get, I guess, an online version of it. There'll be an audiobook as well, but it comes out, in April next year. Like you're saying, I think a big thing when you mentioned aspiration, I think for me, what was really important is like, unless things are fun and enjoyable, we're probably not going to do them. So my real thing with the book was, how do you look at these things as like enjoyment and joy, and just kind of, there's a lot of playfulness to these things, because a lot of the things that you can participate in your home are quite practical and hands-on. I think so much can be conceptual these days, which is constantly in this age of information and being on social media, but what are we doing offline? What are we doing with our, day-to-day lives that actually feels like we can hold something that feels somewhat real? And so the book was really about that, like how can you genuinely kind of get your hands dirty and do something. And also look at this approach, like I was maybe saying a bit earlier, like there is no perfect way, there is no right or wrong way, good or bad way to show up for the environment. It is really just about needing to show up full stop in whatever stage you are in your journey, just like the whole movement and every future, reality on this planet needs everyone to show up. And I was just really interested in that, just celebrating that imperfectness that I think often is what makes people maybe a bit nervous about trying, because they're worried they'll do it wrong. But there really isn't a wrong way to sort of participate in change.
We have covered quite a lot. I'm really, really excited. Thank you again so much for your, for sharing all of this, your passion, your compassion for the environment too, and also for those people that, we are all learning. There's no right or wrong. I think that shows a very compassionate side.
Bonnie, thank you again. We're really grateful for you joining us today. It's been fun chatting with you, and we really appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for asking these questions. And as I said, I'm always really excited in the solutions that exist when it comes to closing the loops of so many things. And another thing to encourage, as I was saying a bit, but for people, to participate in these exciting things, participate in systems such as kind of specific types of recycling that obviously you are doing. I think it's really important for people to know that like they're part of that system, because they're kind of giving you that material to be made into new material. I think often it can feel quite disconnected, like we have nothing to do with this system of recycling, but we really do. So yeah, I would encourage people to just learn more about it and participate in it by recycling, reusing, reducing.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks.